Okay, so we have been talking about perimeter and the number of pools around a plot and so on, right? But I want to make sure we understand this topic really good before we close off the topic. So there are two scenarios I want to be familiar with. It tends to confuse students a lot. So let's start with something simple. So suppose we had a rectangular plot of land, right? Let's say this is 3 and this is 4 meters, right? So this is the rectangular plot of land. And I wanted to find the number of poles needed if you want to put a fence around this, the number of poles needed if you place them 1 meter apart. So find the number of poles needed if you were to place them 1 meter apart this plot. Right now we're talking about the entire plot, right? So right or wrong. So I would do this. Right, no, we aren't finding the area. I want to find the number of poles first. To find the area is simple. We just multiply the length by breadth. But what we need to find is the number of poles needed to put around this plot. Right, so that's correct. Now we would find the perimeter. So the perimeter would be 2 times the length plus 2 times the width, right? Which would be 2 multiplied by 4 plus 2 multiplied by 3. That would give you 8 plus 6, which would give you 14 meters, right? So the distance all around this would be 14 meters. Now, if we are placing poles 1 meter apart, how would I determine that? So I know the length around this shape is 14 meters, but if suppose I wanted to place poles 1 meter apart, what would be the process involved for me doing that? You have any idea? You could message.
So you could repeat that.
If I want to find the number of poles needed to put around this plot, if you are placing them 1 meter apart, how much poles would you need? How would you determine that?
So you would have 13 poles.
Right, you would actually have 14 poles. All you need to do is divide by the 1 meter, right? So number of poles needed would be 14 divided by 1, which would be 14. Right now, let's think about it visually. So this is why I drew the diagram. So I would explain visually and then I would explain the concept. Right, I don't want to get confused with this. That's why I say I would spend all the time before. So remember, it's 4 meters apart, right? So here, from here to here is 4 meters. So how much spaces would be there? We would have 4 spaces, right? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4 to give you the 4 meters. But how much poles do we have? So I'll write it in green. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 poles there, right? Now let me go along here. This is 3. So we have 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3. We'd have to put a pole here because it's on the corner. So let's count again. 6, 7, 8. So we have 8 poles already. Likewise, on this side is also 4. So we have 4 spaces. But remember, the corner would be the same corner post for this post and that. So the distance would be the same. So how many posts? 9, 10, 11. Again, we would have 1 by the corner. So we don't need to have another pole. So 1, 2. So you're on 12 here, 13, 14. So that is how we would get the answer of 14. Following that, Nathan?
Yes.
Right, so what you need to remember is this. If you have a straight line, so not a closed shape. If it's a straight line, you always have 1 extra pole. So you have to take account of that. If it's not a straight line, for example, if it's a closed shape, you can simply divide by this and you do not need to add 1. So that's the idea. Once it's a closed shape, you divide by the distance apart, you'll get the number of poles needed. If it's not a closed shape, you need to add one extra pole, right? So let me show you what I mean by that. So let me do a simple example. So suppose we're using the same idea. Suppose it's a road now. Let me say the road is 5 meters, right? And I want to put poles 1 meter apart. This is what you would do. If it's 5 meters, that means you would have 5 intervals. 1, 2, these are different color. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? We would have 5 intervals. But we put in a pole 1 meter apart. So 5 meters, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gaps, right? But how much poles would we have? We would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So once it's a line, for example, this, once it's not connected in a loop. So for example, this, anything like this is open. It's not a shape like a rectangle or a square. Once it's like this, you would always have one more post than the number of than the distance. So for example, if this was 7 meters, how much posts would you have if you are placing them 1 meter apart? Right, so it's a straight line or not a closed loop, but you need to find the number of posts. Right, so forget this drawing, but that's 5. So 7 meters, let's say 7 meters is a walkway. And I need to find the number of posts that you can put along 7 meters if you are placing them 1 meter apart. How much posts would you need?
8 poles.
8, right? Because it's a straight line, it's an open construct. It's not like a rectangle or anything like that. Because it's a shape like this, you just need to add 1 extra if it's 1 meter, right? And so on like that. Now, if it was closed, so suppose it was closed now, 7 by 3 meters. And I need to find the number of posts that can go around the shape if you're placing them 1 meter apart. So explain to me, how will you go about working a problem like this? So what would be your thinking?
Find
So the
perimeter.
first step, right, you'll find the perimeter. So what would be the perimeter of this when we work it out?
$20 meters.
Right, very good. And how much posts would be needed if we place them 1 meter apart?
20.
Very good, right? So the shape is closed. Okay, so let me do one example. So I'm taking off this side now. How much posts would be needed to fence from A to D? So this whole shape. So first you still need to calculate the perimeter of the shape. So the perimeter would be what?
$17 meters.
Good job. And how much posts would be needed?
17 poles. Posts.
Right. So always ask yourself this. Is this an open thing or is it a closed loop? A closed loop means that enclosed, they don't have an opening or a gap. That's the first thing you need to ask yourself. Does it have a gap?
Yes.
Yes, so that's a gap from here to here. So it's not a closed shape, right? So if it's not a closed shape, what's the method you use? You always add 1 extra to facilitate that, right? That's like the rule if you want to remember it. Once it's not a closed shape you're talking about, you always have to add an extra 1 to close off the shape. If it's a rectangle, a square, a rectangle, any shape that's closed or bound, right?
Sir,
Like for example, let's say it was this. Then you would have been 20. You'd have had to add the 3 and then divide. But remember, here to here is not connected at all. So it would be 17, but you need to add 1 to the extra, for the extra to accommodate it, right? So the easy way to remember it is this. If it's an open, if it's open, meaning like this, part of it left out, or it's just like a line. If it's open or a line, you add 1 more, right? So you always add 1 more post if you're doing that. If it's closed, and what do I mean by closed? Example, a rectangle, a complete rectangle, right? It mustn't have a gap. It must be enclosed. You do not add. Right? So you have simply divided the length or the perimeter by the spaces you would have there. Right? So I'm going to give a few examples because I really want you to see if you get the idea. So all you're doing is telling me whether you would add 1 or whether you would just divide by the space. So first one is a square. And you need to find the number of posts. Would you add 1 when you divide by the number of spaces? In this example,
so you can repeat the
would you add 1 when you find the number of posts in this problem?
yes, because it do not have a gap.
Right, it do not have a gap. So once it do not have a gap, you don't add 1, you leave it as is, you just divide. If it have a gap, so like this one, then you add 1. So once it's missing something, you add 1. Once it's a closed shape, you do not add anything. You just leave it as it is and divide. So let me try a few. This triangle here, and I need to find the number of posts needed. Do I add 1 when I divide, or do I leave it as it is?
So you can excuse me for 1 minute.
No problem. Just let me know when you get back.
Savak.
Okay, great. So this is how to remember it. Closed shape, when we're talking about fencing or putting the number of posts, if it's a closed shape like this, everything is kept together by lines. You do not add 1. Open shape, you will always add an extra 1. So for example, this would be an open shape, right? It's open, and all the lines not connected and have, I mean, the lines connected here, right? But it still have a gap. All the lines must be connected. And then this one would apply. This one would apply to this one, open, right? Look, let me draw another example for you here. So a square would be closed here.
Complete.
What about this? Right, this one would not be complete. So when it's completed, you do not need to add an extra post. When it's not completed, you need to add an extra one. So if it's a line, if it's a shape like this, it could even be 3 lines. You could even do like this and go up like that, right? But the point is that it's not closed. Once it's not closed, you always have to add an extra one. So you're following that now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So let me do a couple examples again, right? So you tell me if I adding one or if I not adding one. So that's the first one,
Add in one.
right? Because it have a gap here, right?
Yes.
Don't worry about the shape, right? You just tell me if you're adding one or if you're not adding one.
Not add in one.
Right, because it's a closed shape here. Good. Let me try two more examples. Adding one or not adding one.
Add one.
Right. Final one now.
Complete. Add one.
Right.
No, not add one.
Right, because it's a complete shape. So you get the idea now. Right, so the rule is this. If it's not a closed shape, you always add extra. If it's not, then you would just divide by the number, right? The distance apart. Right, so now I'm going to give you some questions. So we have about, you need to take about 10 minutes. And let me see if you could answer these problems, right? So you could begin to time yourself. Well, I time you. So you have question one and two, right? You have 10 minutes to answer these two questions, right? So I'll let you know when your time is up. What you would do is you would take a picture of the solution you've written up and you would email me as soon as you finish, right? So I would be here. I would time you. So I'm starting to time. Let me know when you have the pen and so on already, pencil and so on.
So you could repeat that.
Right. So what I want to do is do these questions like if it's an exam. So these would be questions you probably never saw before because I typed it up. Right. So treat it as though it's an exam is based on the same topics we have talked about in the last tutorials with borders and so on. So I want to treat it like as an exam. So this would be the first question you're seeing. So you have any paper close by or a book or something?
So just grab a pencil and a book.
Okay, right. So I want you to write the solution as though it's the SEA exam and you're given these two questions. Right? So question one is like a section two type question. Section two is like a section three question. It's based on the last two tutorials we talked about. So the time is 7:25. I'm going to stop here at 7:35, right? So your time starts now. So treat it like an exam, no calculators, you're writing the solution. When you're finished, you would email me this immediately. Go ahead, start now.
7.
Right. So even though you finish early, take about a minute or two, just look over your answers. Make sure because you have some time, right? So even in the essay exam, if you finish, you take a couple minutes and glance it over because sometimes what I know from my experience, sometimes I make mistakes and I don't see it. So when I look it over, I would see it after. Right? So take 2 minutes. Just double check. Make sure you get the correct answers or the answers your best ability, and then you can proceed to email me. Right? So you have finished the questions in 7 minutes. So that's ahead of the time. But when I mark them, I would know whether you get it. So I'll just mute my mic for 2 minutes and then you could go ahead and submit. Right, Nathan. So now, right about now, your time would have been, you should be taking about this amount of time to answer these two problems, right? So you could go ahead, send the solutions to me via email. I'll let you know when I receive them. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. Not a problem, Nathan. Once I can understand it and read it. Right? So you could just take pictures of it and send it to my email. Hold on a sec, I just waiting until I see it come up in mine. Okay, good. So I got it right. So I would mark them by tomorrow and give you some feedback on them. Right, via email. So you can look out for it tomorrow about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Right? So we I've come to the end of this tutorial. It was a pleasure serving you today. Please take a minute to fill out the quality control questions that would appear at the end of this meeting. Also, Nathan, if you want to try other problems after I mark this one, once you get feedback, you could also do them and send them to me. Right? You could do them on your own time, or if you want to time yourself, which is the better option. Time yourself for the question and do it and hit submit. Let me mark this one first and give you feedback, and then you could go ahead. Right, so all the best in the rest of your studies for exams and so on. I don't think we have any more class with you until. Right, so take care.
So I think I have one or two more one-on-one, so I'm not too sure if it still have space. I have to check and see. So you might have one or you might not. I'm not too
No
sure.
problem. Well, if it's there, I would get the appointment anyways.
Yes, yes.
But if that's the case, I would just be doing this with him, like just giving him drills.
Yes, okay, great, thanks. But he did the one you sent. I have to
Yes,
look. He didn't give it to you.
yes, I'll check it and give him some feedback tomorrow
right.
afternoon.
Okay, great. Have a good night.
If you want, you could send some to us as well.
Okay, no problem.
And time him and send it.
No problem. All right, then. Good night.
All right, take care.